my plan is to spend some time unpacking both of these issues, okay? And I'm a very big believer in getting to the punchline right away. So what are the takeaways that I want you to bring back with you to your day jobs, right? And obviously, since I'm not with you and I don't know the audience, I don't know how many of you have embraced generative AI within your wealth management practices today or not. If you haven't, it's certainly going to be time to do so tomorrow. But there are many high impact use cases that are already being used by businesses today, including in the financial services industry. McKinsey has spoken and reported consistently about the 4 universal high impact use cases that apply to basically any industry, all of which are relevant to the financial services industry and wealth management. The gains that we are beginning to see are truly profound. And I'm going to share a number of case studies with you, both inside of the financial services industry and elsewhere, that are going to demonstrate some of these numbers. But what we are seeing is dramatic increases in productivity through automation, an improved quality of work on behalf of people that are already using these tools in their day jobs. Within the world of marketing and sales and the creative arts, dramatic improvements in enhanced creativity. Because it is eliminating people's need to work on the more tedious aspects of their work, it's improving their job satisfaction and therefore their retention as employees. And we're starting to see, and I'm going to share some McKinsey data already, significant quantification of both revenue increases and cost reductions within companies that have been sort of in the early wave of adoption. I imagine as wealth managers, you are all, screen junkies. You're paying attention to the news all day, every day. And so I don't think I have to reinforce too hard just how quickly this space is moving. And we're already beginning to see the benefits of this move to the agentic era. And so a bit of history. For the last 250 years, we have lived through what are now 6 different eras of innovation. The first began in the mid-1780s in London, England, with what was noted at the time as the Industrial Revolution. And what you see on this curve is that in each era, it was driven by a handful of very significant scientific inventions and commercial innovations that powered the economy and that changed societal behavior and societal norms and the way that we work. And that with each successive era, we see that the time compression gets tighter. So while the first industrial revolution was a 60-year revolution, the software revolution lasted only 30 years. And we are now in the 6th wave, very squarely in the 6th wave, which is powered by AI, the Internet of Things. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of robotic and drone advancements as well. And so you can see that the slope of the curve increases dramatically because we transition from a world of atoms to bits. And so for those of you who pay attention, I think it's pretty clear to most of you in the room that when you look at the rolling 10-year yield on the S&P 500, there's a very high correlation between enthusiasm or confidence in the stock market with the next boom in innovation. And so these waves, these cycles have correlated very, very closely with each of the innovation eras, from the railway and steel to electrification, to the auto industry, to IT. And now we're seeing, as of last night, record highs on the NASDAQ, the NYSE, and the S&P 500, right? So this is really playing out exactly as we might have predicted it would. Now, the AI revolution started 70 plus years ago. This is not new. And we've had a lot of milestones that have been achieved over those 70 years, and we've had some setbacks. But things really started to take shape in the laboratory of Dr. Geoffrey Hinton, who recently won a Nobel Prize up at the University of Toronto, when he was able to prove that deep learning and neural networks, which mimic the human brain, were the right way to begin to train AI models. And so we have been living in the future, right? And depending on where you live, who you associate with, who you work with, some of us are living in the future. It has arrived. And the question is, do you want to join me in the future? Okay. And how do we do that? Well, people have always been using digital transformation to improve the performance of their companies, to improve the financial outcomes that they are driving toward, right? And we've been through a number of different transformative eras within the enterprise since 2003, whether the era of wage arbitrage and offshoring, or process excellence, or really digging into the digital age over the last 10 years, and now in the era of AI, right? This has always been something that has allowed companies with fearless leaders to embrace and outperform their peers. And so many of you may know Amara's Law. What Amara's Law says is we always overestimate the impact of technology in the short run, and we underestimate it in the long run. And we've seen this time and time again. Think of the dot-com boom of the late 1990s and the euphoria, and as Alan Greenspan, the chair of the Fed at the time, said, an era of irrational exuberance, which led to an implosion of the NASDAQ, which lost 85–90% of its value in a very short period of time. But in the wake of that implosion, we have Amazon, we have Shine, we have Temu, we have massive, massive e-commerce companies generating hundreds of billions, $500 billion on the case of Amazon. So there was a classic underestimation of the profound impact of e-commerce, okay? But now, beginning in November of 2022, we have entered into a new frontier, and it is probably the most exciting that I have seen in my professional lifetime. And so why is that? Well, it turns out that generative AI, unlike prior types of AI, like machine learning or natural language processing, it's a general purpose platform. I think of it as a Swiss Army knife on steroids. There's virtually no use case that you can imagine that it can't help you with. Okay, and so early adopters have begun to see a wide range of different ways that generative AI can help them. It's being used as a personal assistant. It's being used by just about everyone today as a creator, creating PowerPoint presentations, creating email drafts, creating, talks and all kinds of content. It's being used to create all kinds of social media posts and generate all kinds of next generation worth of art. It's a thought partner. It's amazing at challenging you, right? Give it the task of picking apart your talk, picking apart your business model. And it's amazing at doing research. And I got to believe all of you know that, given what you do for your day job, okay? Now, here's where it gets interesting. This framework is called the WINS framework, the WINS framework. And it stands for words, images, numbers, and sounds, okay? And these 4 elements really are a subset of knowledge work. But what you see in the upper right-hand quadrant, which is very relevant to you in the audience, is that there are a number of industries that have a very high percentage of their cost base in WINS-related work. And they also have a very significant amount of digitization in their WINS work. And these are the companies that are in the crucible. These are the companies that are the first ones to see an assault on their business models. Think back to what happened when we saw Napster and peer-to-peer sharing, and the incredible impact on Hollywood and the music industry, right? And the newspaper industry, right? Those were the first companies to really be disrupted. And now we're looking at the crucible companies, and we're seeing deals being cut in Hollywood. Just last week, there was a major announcement of a company called Promise that is going to be the first AI native Hollywood studio. But financial services, education, and then next in line are companies like the home decor industry. And so in the lower right of this graphic, you see a lot of the major financial services, global brands that are pioneering the way. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how they're doing it within, the adoption of GenAI. Okay. So if you're not taking action, then there's really only one fate. Okay. You're going to get steamrolled. And here's an example of a company that did not take action and is suffering the consequences. So some of you may have children that have used Chegg. Chegg started off as a textbook rental company that quickly became an edtech company. And they were doing very, very well until you see this insane collapse. They fell off of a cliff. And if you saw the actual date, it would be right after ChatGPT 3.5 launched. They have not responded. And as a result of that complacency, they have lost 99% of their market share. That is an incredibly disheartening thing for the shareholders of this company. And it happened almost overnight. Okay. Now, let me look at some companies that have actually provided a level of leadership. Let's look at the financial services company Klarna. You may know Klarna. They are a buy now, pay later app. They're about to go public on a U.S. exchange. They just filed documents with the SEC recently. They're anticipating a $20 billion valuation on IPO. This is a company where the weekend that ChatGPT dropped, the entire leadership team went off and said, okay, let us figure out what implications this may have on our business. And they came back and they said, we are going to just fundamentally reinvent the way that we work. And what has occurred as a result of that willingness to put the courage of their convictions into action is they saw in their very first quarter 16% growth in the volume of their customers while keeping their operating expenses flat. They reduced sales and marketing expenses by 11%, in most cases by not outsourcing to agencies, but by using these tools to improve the productivity of their internal team. They were able to take 2/3 of their customer service inquiries through chatbots, through a finely tuned OpenAI chatbot, and they were able to reduce customer service operations expenses by 10%. And we're talking millions of inquiries in a quarter. And so this company, at a time when, one, it wants to go public, and two, it saw interest rates rise dramatically when the Fed increased rates recently. The Fed, before the Fed increased rates, they saw a $40 million positive impact on their bottom line. Okay. Now, let me go to the second wave, the companies that are, expected to be hit next, because this is a fascinating story of investing. The company IKEA, they're everywhere in the world. I'm sure you all know them. They decided to take 1,000 of their customer support call center people and upskill them, retrain them, and turn them into interior decorators. By so doing, they were able to generate an incremental $1.6 billion in revenue in the first year of this new action. Okay. And so I know that, depending on where you might live, depending on what you might read, depending on what social circles you live in, you might be in an echo chamber. And you might be hearing a lot about, oh my God, AI is going to be the end of the world. It's dangerous. It's terrible. It hallucinates. We can't depend on it. We should try to just, clamp down the top of the Pandora's box and nail it shut. But my message to you is a message I would have delivered when any new technology is being brought to market. Nothing is to be feared in life. It is only to be understood. And so now, today is the time to understand more so that we fear less. And so one of the common complaints is that AI hallucinates. So how can a wealth manager possibly depend on AI when you can't count on its answers? And the problem is that First of all, AI is hallucinating much less than it began 2 years ago because the models have been improving dramatically over the last 2 years. But much more importantly, a lot of that misinformation came from the use of consumer-grade AI, not enterprise-grade AI. Most organizations, including JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, many others, they're fine-tuning these models, right? So they're training these models on proprietary data. And then they are supplementing these models with something called retrieval augmented generation. And what that basically says is before the model responds, you might have fed it 10,000, 100,000 company-specific data points, articles, etc. So it's literally drawing on the information that you have shared with the model, not the stuff that is the toxic stuff that's out on X right now. And so there's a lot of misinformation and unnecessary fear about hallucination today that if anybody takes a quick look, they would recognize that this is not necessarily an issue. Okay? Now, let me talk about a company that you might appreciate. The legal industry, as you probably saw, is another industry in the crucible, right? They do a lot of stuff that is in the WINS framework under words. And so a company known as Harvey AI decided that it would use the fine-tuning and the retrieval augmented generation on an open AI model. And they created a solution for the legal industry. And 125 of the leading law firms and inside law teams at major enterprises have already signed on with Harvey. What we're seeing is that some of their earliest customers are seeing a spread of the use across the entire firm. So Allen Overy, which was their very first customer, it's a super firm, right? 3,500 lawyers. They've already adopted it, and they've done 40,000 queries as of about a month ago. So what Harvey is seeing is that 70+% of their clients, lawyers and paralegals, are using their tool today. So in a year and a half, they've got 45,000 lawyers. That's an extraordinary growth rate for a startup. Okay? So let's talk now about why this revolution is happening. Okay? And let me offer you some proof. If you pay attention to these surveys as I do, whether it be McKinsey or KPMG or Deloitte or Bain or BCG, you name it, it is the number one priority right now on the agenda of the CEO and the C-suite. Okay? 75% of people, according to the Microsoft LinkedIn annual workforce survey, are already using AI at work. And this is not just a US number. This is a global number. Okay? Gartner Group, without question, the most respected of all of the technology analyst firms, recently went off in October and they interviewed CIOs and technology executives. And what they learned is that 37% of organizations are already using AI in production. That is up by 4x in a year. We're seeing a double rate of adoption compared to the adoption of the internet. Okay? OpenAI has 250 million active users on ChatGPT. 250 million users. Okay? That's a remarkable growth rate, right? From a cold start in 2022, they're going to finish the year with nearly $4 billion in revenue, and they're on track to do $11.5 billion next year. I'm sure you'd love to see some of your investments show that kind of financial performance. Okay. And so that's looking at a startup in the Valley, right? In Silicon Valley. But let's look at a mega company, a company with a $3 trillion market capitalization, Microsoft. In the last year, they've created annualized AI revenue, incremental revenue, a new business of $10 billion in 1 year. It is the fastest growing business in the history of Microsoft. And their Microsoft 365 Copilot business has driven an increase in their productivity tools by 15%. Okay? Now let's look at this McKinsey heat map, right? So the heat map, of course, the darker the color, the higher the impact. And what you're seeing here is on the vertical axis, you're seeing a variety of industries, and I've denoted banking with a big arrow. And then across the horizontal, we're seeing a lot of functions within the enterprise that benefit from the use of generative AI. And so the first is in banking, you see across that line, we have dark blue under marketing and sales. In fact, marketing and sales is a huge beneficiary in every industry. It's low-hanging fruit. Customer operations, of course, is very big in banking, right? Obviously, we use chatbots and apps to interact with many of our banks. And then we certainly see software engineering, right? The banking industry, the wealth industry, of course, is very heavily dependent on digital technology. And then risk and legal is yet another function that has a dramatic ability to be positively impacted. So this heat map is just an overview of where the banking industry, and that's the best proxy I have for the financial service industry, can see benefit, okay? Now, for those of you who have your own internal software engineering group, Microsoft has a product called GitHub Copilot. GitHub Copilot is an automatic code generation tool. Several million software engineers are using GitHub Copilot today. It was one of the very first applications built on OpenAI ChatGPT to hit the market. Software developers are developing code 55% quicker than they could before. Almost half of the code that they are writing and submitting into production is now being written by Copilot. And because they're not doing the tedious stuff that software developers hate, they're 75% more fulfilled in their jobs, which is you talk about having your cake and eating it too. And so this is just one statistic. Before Copilot, the average developer would take, 1 hour and 11 minutes to complete a task. And with Copilot, without Copilot, it would take 2 hours and 41 minutes. With Copilot, 1 hour and 11 minutes. So it's a 56% reduction in time, okay? And we know that there's a massive shortage of software engineering talent in the world. We've always been about 1 million developers short. So if you can get that kind of productivity, you've basically improved the capacity of your development team by 2x, okay? And now let's look at the industry that you live in, the industry of financial services and banking. And what we're seeing here is just another example, and it's an eye chart, and I don't expect you to read it. I just expect you to take away the impression that AI is changing banking from top to bottom across the entire value chain, okay? Now, what you might note is that your compatriots in the financial services industry are amongst the most aggressive adopters of AI. A full 40% in that dark blue color are actively implementing GenAI in their workplaces today. Another 42% are exploring it. So that puts it, basically on par with the telco and in the industrial world as the 3 most aggressive adopters of generative AI. And then if we look at occupation groups, people in finance, it happens to also be one of the most highly ranked, highly used of all of the different occupation groups across the board. And then financial services and real estate, the most significant adopter, right? So this is an industry that has clearly adopted AI very aggressively, okay? So let's look at some success stories. Klarna, I've already unpacked for you, so I'm going to leave it for now. Morgan Stanley has taken an open AI model, right? The middle column is which vendor did they use? And they have created a chatbot that has been trained on tens of thousands of internal documents that makes it, and then they have an enterprise search function. So all wealth advisors around the world are able to get immediate access, right? All of those silos have been broken down. Goldman Sachs has worked with a variety of vendors, including OpenAI's arch rival Anthropic, as well as Google and Meta. And they are doing significant code generation. They're doing document search. They're doing document summarization. Most of you likely know Morningstar, right? This is a company that provides a lot of financial industry research and analysis. They have created a variety of different tools built on OpenAI as well that allow wealth advisors and institutional investors to access through voice commands and through text commands. And then JP Morgan has created an application to improve risk management, customer service, okay? So let's just do a little bit deeper dive on Morgan Stanley since you are in this world. And so they understand that a lot of the data that they wanted their wealth managers to have access to was unreachable. They understood that generative AI could help them bridge that gap because it's phenomenal at unstructured data. So they took a model from OpenAI, they trained it on vast amounts of internal knowledge and expertise, and their internal assessment is that it is transformative in its ability to serve clients, okay? Now, I'm going to skip a bunch of slides, and I just want to say that this thing is improving at warp speed. So there is an interim step in between what we would call assistive AI and agentic AI, and we're now in this wave called system thinking. OpenAI has released a new model called O1 that takes time to think before it responds. And so I've run some experiments where I've asked ChatGPT-4 to do something, and it came back and said, sorry, no can do. And then I put the same prompt into O1, and it did it in seconds. Now, O1 is what is called a systems model. O1 is delivering PhD level responses, PhD level responses. It is now capable, right? A year ago, people said that ChatGPT is never going to be good at math. Well, never say never, because O1 in the lime green color on the right, or whatever that color is, aqua green color, would have won the math Olympiad if it competed, okay? Look at the improvement over GPT-4. It went from answering 13% of the questions correctly to 83% in a year. It also would have won the US Coding Olympiad, or the Global Coding Olympiad. It improved from 11% of the correct answers to 89%. So this happened in a year, okay? And so now let's look into the future, right? Where are we going? What is AI going to look like when it grows up? Well, we're going to be doing a lot more around agentic AI. And so the question is, what is agentic AI, right? It is a new wave of applications that can solve complex problems, and it can literally mimic what you and I do to get work done, okay? So they're able to perceive the environment that they're in. They can reason. They can actually make decisions, and they can autonomously act on our behalf as our agents to achieve the goals that we've set out for them, okay? So the key characteristics of an agent are that it is autonomous, it is inherently adaptable because it has to respond to stimuli in the environment, it needs to be goal-oriented, and of course, it needs to be intelligent. And so it's leveraging a lot of different sub-elements of AI. Natural language processing, what does that mean? It means that we can communicate with a system through our voices. It understands the English language. It's able to do machine learning. It's able to recognize patterns. And it has computer vision. It's able to see things in the physical world and recognize them and act on them. Okay, so it's got perception capabilities. It can gather information from sensors or external sources. It can reason, it can analyze, and it can interpret information to understand a situation. Based on its reasoning, it then chooses the best course of action. You can execute decisions using actuators, meaning that it's doing the task on your behalf. Or it might interact with a system, with a laptop, with a mobile phone. And it's able to get smarter over time, right? This is the deep learning that has made generative AI so powerful. And I'm going to talk about Cicero in a minute. It's a phenomenal case study, okay? So a few use cases. You can do market research. You can literally set off this agentic system to go off and synthesize data from a lot of different databases and data sources, including customer feedback and market trends. And imagine in your world where you're investing on behalf of your clients, this is something you do all day, every day. Content creation, right? You're communicating with your clients constantly about your performance and about what you believe are the investment theses that they need to be thinking about. And you're able to generate drafts of that, refine content, and get that out to your clients. We talked already about the chatbots doing an amazing job at customer service. Fidelity Investments is just one example of many that is using generative AI today to deliver far better net promoter scores of their customer service department. We already looked at how incredible it is at doing sales and marketing. Klarna was an example of that. And to the extent that you're designing new products, new digital experiences for your customers, it's able to coordinate all of the stages across the product development cycle, and then seamlessly deliver an outcome. All right, so I'm going to skip these two slides, and I don't know how many of you know this game, Diplomacy. Diplomacy is a very sophisticated game, and this is a bit of an eye chart, so I'm going to read it. It is a game that is used largely by people that are relatively intellectual. It's all about geopolitical negotiation. So it's a board game that is set in Europe at the very beginning of the 20th century, just before World War I. And what you have is a map of that Europe with 7 of the major powers of the day. And it's divided into a number of land and sea regions. And the objective of the 7 players in this game is to capture and control 18 out of the 34 supply centers, because that will give them strategic control of the continent, okay? There's no randomness. There's no dice or cards. This is purely based on skill. At the beginning of this game, all units have equal strength, and it requires incredible social and interpersonal skills to be effective. And so players are expected to think very strategically. Now, this game has been played by Henry Kissinger, by John F. Kennedy, and many, many luminaries, secretaries of state, heads of state. And it's really seen as a very realistic model on international relations, okay? And it's an intense game. It tests friendships. And so this is kind of what the game board looks like, because everybody is trying to make moves to, win the war, right? Or win over property, land. And then Meta came in and they said, we're going to create an agent that's going to play this game. Let's see how it does. And so here's an example of a screenshot or 3 screenshots of the Meta Cicero app, the Agentic app, playing the game. And what is the outcome? Well, the outcome, very simply, is that with the Meta Cicero product, playing in tournament, it played in 40 tournaments, and it wound up winning 95% of the games against human experts. It wound up having a score, an average score that was double the next highest score. But really importantly, the people that were playing against it had no idea that England was actually an agentic application. They thought they were interacting with a human being. Further, they found that the Cicero tool engaged in twice as much discussion, twice as much dialogue as all of the other players, okay? So this is a fascinating example, very early in this wave of agentic AI, of what is possible with an incredibly complex game. Now, let me talk about a couple of things that are more practical. Let's look at sales, okay? This has been the holy grail for a very long time. We all know that, it's very, very difficult to find a consistently high-performing sales team. A company known as Artisan that came out of the famous Y Combinator accelerator last year decided to build one of the very first agentic applications. And the agentic application is based on this avatar, whose photo we can see here, image, known as Ava. And Ava is the first AI salesperson. You can onboard Ava in about 10 minutes. You can then literally enable Ava to create your target ideal customer profile or persona. Since this slide was created, the number has increased from 270 to 310 million emails. So Ava has access to 310 million emails. With your guidance and your recommendation on tone of voice, Ava can ghostwrite and send thousands of sales-focused emails at a time, understanding how to keep you from being blacklisted. She can then book meetings with prospective clients on your behalf and put those meetings directly in your calendar. Now, I can tell you from firsthand experience, I've used early versions of Ava myself, and I was blown away by how incredibly effective it was. Some of the courses I teach, I have sales VPs in my classes, and I mention Ava, and they're all excited about trying it. Many of them have piloted, and they're seeing incredible results. And I imagine many of you in the room are constantly soliciting clients for your practices, and that this would be, a very interesting tool for you to potentially pilot and possibly deploy in production. And then let me just share one last example, which is the world of software engineering. We already saw the impact of GitHub Copilot, but now we have a tool called Devin AI, and it is the world's first fully autonomous AI software engineer. And basically going through a lot of the same methodology that I described when I gave you an overview of what an agentic app does. Okay, this is what a screenshot looks like of me prompting a Devin. I want you to create a map where I can select major airports in the US and see travel time between them, okay? The first thing it does is it creates a plan. It says, this is how I, Devin, an agentic workflow, is going to solve the problem. And then it creates code to do that. And then it's able to go back into itself and correct the code, fix the errors that it made itself, okay? And it actually went through a very, very significant debugging attempt, okay? And it also did a very, very good job of managing me, telling me what was going on and asking me if I could provide input, okay? So this is the future. This is agentic AI. And so what's going to happen is it's going to flip the script. So many of you are probably invested in tech companies, including Salesforce.com, Workday, ServiceNow, many others. Early companies are saying, you know what, with agentic AI, we don't need to pay Salesforce millions of dollars a year for subscriptions for our employees. We can actually use agentic AI to drive outcomes in a far more cost-effective way, maybe 10% of what we're paying Salesforce today. So we think that we're going to start to see AI eating enterprise SaaS. And so what we're seeing is the world is being turned upside down, and that instead of software as a service, which is what Salesforce.com invented, we're going to start seeing service as software. So instead of selling seats, we're selling work output, and we're charging people based on the achievements of what our agentic applications are able to do. And we're starting to see the old guard, a lot of names you probably know, and I bet a lot of you are invested in some of these companies, whether it be Adobe, whether it be ServiceNow, whether it be Zendesk. But we're seeing an emerging new guard that are using generative AI and agentic AI to begin to create the next companies that will create productivity within large enterprises. Okay, so moving forward, as I wrap up, if you're not using generative AI, I warn you to mind the gap. You don't want to be the next Chegg. And please do not let a lot of the fear mongering that the media is so good at to make you look like my friend the deer here, staring into the headlights and just frozen in the middle of the road. Okay. And so the future has not been kind to its enemies. And as we've seen, from the 1780s on, there are always those companies that embrace the future ahead of their peers. And those are the ones that thrive financially in the marketplaces, right? So what I will tell you as I close out here is a lot of organizations think that if I don't allow generative AI in my company, then I'm actually being conservative. And it turns out you're actually being reckless, because what happens is employees are going to bring their AI to work anyway. We've already seen that. But they're going to be using consumer grade tools. And so when they use consumer grade tools, those tools don't have the same protections of enterprise level tools. They don't offer you indemnification. They don't offer you copyright protection. They actually upload your data to the model and train it. And so companies need to very quickly create in-house their own AI policies, their own guardrails, their own terms of use. And very much like we've had to train our employees on security policy to keep from having information stolen during a cyber hack attack, we need to have the same level of rigor and care and thoughtfulness as we build our companies today in this new era of AI. Okay, so with that, I appreciate your patience, and I'm opening up the floor for questions. And Eduardo, I'll leave it to you to moderate.
All right, wonderful, Mike. ¿Alguna pregunta, por favor, para Mike? Positiva, negativa. So I'm asking if you have a positive question or a negative question about, the end of the world. We don't have any believers here. We're all believers. Can you share, Mike, with us, about this CIO meeting at Boston next year also?
So the MIT CIO Symposium is going to be in mid-May in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And we've expanded it into a 2-day event. I think it's a great event for anybody who wants to pay attention to what's happening in the world of AI.
Wonderful, wonderful. So questions, please. Preguntas. All right, Mike. Yeah.
I am very impressed of what's happening and so quickly, and I am very worried about what is going to happen with poor and small countries like Peru.
Yeah.
If we can catch up with whatever is happening today in the world, what can we do? How can we close the gap? Which is widening.
Right, and so it's obviously a very, very relevant and appropriate concern. But I think it's important to understand that a lot of these tools are available to everyone, right? You don't have to have an AI nation-state strategy to thrive in this era. And so it's important to know that the cost of AI has come down by 100x in just the last 12 months. The models that are being developed today are far smaller, right? And you're going to start to see very quickly, right? We've already seen Apple Intelligence. It's not quite delivered the promise yet, but what we're starting to see is that AI is going to be democratized, right? It's going to live on your phones. It's going to live on your iPads. But you can still today get an incredibly powerful model from OpenAI, from a company called Anthropic, from Google for free, okay, for personal use. But in an enterprise setting, it's only going to cost your employees $20 a person to use these tools. So it's not like you're going to be spending tens of millions of dollars on a Salesforce.com subscription, for example. So these tools are a lot more accessible and affordable than you might understand. And I think that, but the key though is, right, until you start to dig in with your company, it just won't be obvious, right? So the journey begins with a level of curiosity and a level of experimentation. But all of the tools that, I talked about today, there are free versions of them that you can use, and you can quickly upgrade to a $20 a month subscription, which is pretty cost effective based on the time savings and the productivity benefits that it delivers.
Mike, I have a question. What do you think, not at a company level, but at a society, the whole society level, what's going to happen with the future of work? You're going to be like a positive generation of jobs, or of course, there are going to be jobs going to be destroyed, new jobs created. What do you think is going to be the balance worldwide?
Yeah, there is no question it's going to have an impact on the workforce, right? I think anybody that says otherwise is not being very honest with you. But what we have to understand is that just in the last 30 years, more than half of the jobs that exist in the world didn't exist before. And so we've seen this repeated time and time again, where there's always, right, people just naturally are afraid of change, right? Change freaks people out. But what history suggests is anytime there's a new inflection point, a new disruptive technology, it creates jobs while replacing other jobs. And so there's no question that, people working in call centers, right? The call center job, which is not a very fun job, right? Is going to go away, right? And when you look at what IKEA did as an example, right? They upskilled 1,000 people to a much more fun, creative job, which is an interior designer. It's kind of a best of both worlds, right? They're saving money and generating massive incremental revenue while giving people a better work experience, a more creative, more enjoyable work experience. So I think, especially for those of you who have kids, you want to make sure that they're learning these skills in school. And if their schools aren't teaching them, then they're doing this stuff at home. They need to be AI fluent to thrive in the future workplace. It's critical.
Yes, just something we're promoting here. The future of work started from high school. Another question, Mike. What about these new majors, new careers, prompt engineers?
Yeah.
Do you think that's a valid career, or they are going to be replaced by Agentic AI?
Yeah, I think that, quite frankly, prompt engineering was overblown. I never really understood why people made such a big deal, right? Because we're able to communicate with these chatbots in English or Spanish, whether through voice or whether through typing, all you have to do is type a detailed prompt and you will get the response you want. If you don't, you just ask it a different way or you add more detail. So I think prompt engineering by and of itself is not a career. I think students that are studying, certainly studying entrepreneurship, right? Because it teaches you how to solve problems. I think that's a very critical skill. I think anything that can be learned around data science is going to be very, very important, right? There will be, majors that will be all around AI, right? So I think there will be new majors that will evolve that will be important, but they're going to be more classic than something that I think is very almost ephemeral, right? Something that has a very limited window like prompt engineering. But I'm seeing a lot of my students today doing double major in entrepreneurship or business and data science. I think it's the power major today. Those two skills combined are going to make students very marketable.
Wonderful, Mike. Okay, so Mike, so we'll catch up later. So to talk about the next steps. All right. So we're very thankful, and please, big clap for Mike again. Yeah.
All right, Eduardo, thank you for inviting me, and I hope that you folks are going to take something away from the talk today. Have a great rest of the conference. Bye-bye.
Wonderful.